Hello, everyone. You are very welcome to episode 13 of In Conversation With. My name is Sinead, and I'm delighted to be hosting another episode this week. You're very welcome if you are new or a returning guest. This is a webinar that we run every Wednesday evening here in the Student Recruitment Office. And we chat to two guests every week in half-an-hour slots. And we are using it as a way to basically explain various aspects of our courses by speaking with students, graduates, or even in today's case, a staff member of one of our courses. So we have a great episode coming up today at 4 o'clock, and just in another couple of minutes, I'm going to welcome in Ronan Guilfoyle to the chat, who is one of the chairs of the Jazz and Contemporary Music Performance degree in DCU. And then at 4:30, we will have a recent graduate talking to us about the Bachelor of Arts Joint Honours degree in DCU. So just before we get started, I will draw your attention to the Q&A function in the chat. If anything comes to mind and you would like to ask our guests or myself any questions, please make use of that function there, and we will make sure to get an answer to you in some way, shape or form. So without further ado, I think we'll get started. I'm going to bring Ronan into the chat, so hopefully this works. It's always a moment of questioning. Let's see, we'll promote Ronan to a panelist and see if he's able to join us there. Okay. Ronan, hello.
Hey, how are you?
Fantastic. I'm always terrified that this isn't going to work and it'll be a blank screen. How are you?
I'm fine now that it's working.
Brilliant. It's a relief for us all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening to come and talk to us today. It's a fantastic resource for students to be able to chat directly or even watch back to someone who's, couldn't be more involved in the course. Who better to hear from than you yourself? So if we start off, say, if I was a sixth-year student who had no idea, had never heard of this course before in their life, how would you kind of pitch that to them upon first conversation?
It would hugely depend on whether you were involved in music, because it is a music performance degree, and the word performance is hugely important in that title. Not all music degrees are performance degrees. Most music degrees will have some aspect of performance in the 4 years. They're usually 4-year degrees, and there are a couple that have no music performance parts. They're quite academic music programs, and they tend to be training people who want to go on to be musicologists or ethnomusicologists. But most programs do have some element of performance, and and depending on what their what their stylistic leaning is, then it will have a certain amount of performance or not. Now, the difference between our program and any other one on the island of Ireland, for that matter, is that we are the only performance degree. In other words, we are training people to be on stage and play music, and that is the principal thing that we do. So if you're somebody who's involved in music, obviously, and would like to, here's the big question. This is the way we put this. Do you want a life in music? That's the question. Do you want a life in music? People say, oh, music career, and of course, that word career is so loaded, as I'm sure anybody listening to me now has had that experience with their parents. Oh, music career. Oh no, it's not a career. And you hear this word career all the time. But the reality is that's kind of the wrong way to look at it. If you're really interested in this, it's more a question of, do you want a life in music? Because if you have a life in music, the career comes with it anyway. Mm-hmm. So you don't go into music for a career, whatever that means. To say, well, what's a career? Well, a career is something in which you can, you're focusing towards, let's say, a certain lifestyle. Let's say there are clear paths that you will go down to do that. Yeah. And I say a certain lifestyle. I'm not necessarily talking about making money or whatever. That's part of it, of course, because being a musician is a lifestyle. It is a way of being, and it's a way of being in the world. Now, I'm someone who's been involved in music myself for more than 40 years. I'm still a professional player. I'm a bass player. I'm a composer. I play, I compose, and I teach. And that's like most musicians these days. This is the three things that nearly everybody does. Very few people only do one thing. So I'm a performer, I'm a composer, and I'm a teacher. And I teach, guess what I teach? Composition and performance. So this is not a coincidence. So I really believe, and for anybody listening who's really passionate about music, I think it's great. For me, one thing I always say to incoming students is, I admire you guys just for being here. because it's a vocation. The desire to be a musician and the desire to be involved in music demands a certain kind of passion, and I think it's great to see young people with that passion. So as far as I'm concerned, I admire them before I hear them play. Even when they turn up for audition, I admire them, because before that. So I'm really passionate about music. However, I'm also pragmatic, and the reality is that to have this life in music that we talk about, you need to be equipped to have that life in music. If opportunities arise for you and you do not have the information to take those opportunities, well, then you might as well not have those opportunities, because you're not going to take them. So what that means is that you need, as well as your passion for music, on a pragmatic level, you need a portfolio of skills that are transferable into almost any kind of music. And so what does that mean? It means you need to be able to play your instrument very well. Now, when I say instrument, if there are singers listening, I'm also speaking to them. That's your instrument. Your voice is your instrument. So I'm not just speaking to instrumentalists. So whenever I use the word instrument for singers, you can take for granted I'm including
still counts. Yeah.
You as well. So your technique needs to be really good. You need to be totally in command of your instrument. You need to be able to make a great sound on it. You need to be able to know the technique of it, whether if you're a guitar player, how to do the proper fingerings, similar if you're piano, if you're a saxophone or wind player, embouchure, breath control, if you're a singer, breath control, intonation, singing. All instruments have their own technical issues. So you really need to learn that stuff. The other thing you need to do is understand how music works. So that means being involved in things like composition, harmony, arranging. Arranging is a very interesting one. That's where you take music and you arrange it for somebody. So people don't realize that that's a very big employer of musicians. You really need to be skilled in order to do it. So what it means is, let's say there's a folk singer, let's say, but they want to do a bigger thing with 6 people and the 3 saxophone players and 2 key. You see this all the time. You see a band, but often the guys in the back of the band are in kind of slightly darkness because the producer wants to make sure that the person out front is
sure.
But so these people behind tend to be hired to play with this singer usually. But very rarely would the singer have the kind of skills to write all the arrangements for the saxophones and all of that kind of stuff. So arrangers are people who are brought in to do that. They're given the basic song and they said, I'd love to have brass on this and 3 backing singers and a drummer and a bass player and 2 guitar players and a keyboard. And the arranger says, right, I'll have that for you day after tomorrow. And they write the arrangement. So this is huge in music. It's a huge employer of musicians. So if you saw something like, at the very highest level, I'm talking about like a commercial highest level, like someone like Beyonce or Lady Gaga or somebody like that, they have these huge bands on the stage, right? They do not do the arrangements for those bands. Mm-hmm. They are done by professional arrangers. That's musical directors usually, become musical directors. So we teach arranging. Arranging is 3 out of the 4 years you study arranging. Study composition, so how to compose your own music. You study harmony and theory to understand, for those of you who've done classical music and always hated doing theory, which is very classical experience. If you're doing your piano lessons, grade 3, and now you have to do your theory for grade 3. And often you don't really understand why you're doing that. You have no idea why you're doing that. Mm-hmm. Why am I have to do this? Because it doesn't seem to have any impact on you. And so you kind of get this aversion to theory. But actually theory is really interesting. In our program, we describe theory as why stuff sounds good. That's why it sounds good. Because these are the rules. Like you do that, and then you put that with that, it sounds great. That's harmony. That's all it is. It's just like, how can you use that to make your music sound great? So unlike in the classical grade system, the theory has an everyday practicality. It's not something you just need to do to pass your grades, even though you don't quite know how to do it. So we do rhythm studies for all 4 years. That's a thing to get your rhythmic technique better, to be a more rhythmic player, and that's regardless of what instrument you play. So that's mostly singing and clapping, all kinds of fun with that. Singing gets quite difficult, and by the end of the last 4 years, we always say, we end up with a bunch of rhythmic X-Men. But we hope they use their powers for good rather than evil. But anyway, we do rhythm studies. And of course you play in 2 different bands every week. because playing in ensembles is incredibly important. That's where everything comes into play when you're playing in a band. You know, your harmony knowledge, your instrumental knowledge, your ability to compose, your ability to improvise, your ability to arrange. They're all focused on when you play in a band, everything is put into that. It's like a funnel that goes into the band. So everything else around that. So really you'll be playing in 2 different bands every week for the 4 years. And you also have an individual lesson on your instrument every week, and you have a group lesson on your instrument. So you have, let's say you're a bass player, you'd have a one-on-one lesson with a bass teacher every week, and you'll also have a group lesson with the other bass players in your year and a teacher. So you've got 2 lessons on your instrument.
Okay.
This is the same for voice as well. And so at the end of it, what are we looking at? Well, we also have some things called contextual studies, where you're studying things like music of the African diaspora. So that's the music of the Caribbean, like Brazilian music, Cuban music, you know, New Orleans music, music from Haiti and all that kind of stuff. It's very interesting, in the history of that music. These are called contextual studies. So sometimes the question I'm asked is, well, how much playing do you do? And the way we do it is, well, we are a performance degree. So we reckon about 80% of the time you have your instrument in your hands.
Okay.
So,
wow.
So it's
so
very
hands-on and practical.
Absolutely. And my advice to people, if they're thinking about, you know, what do I want to do, I would say to you, you should come to us if you really want to play. If you like playing as just, oh, I like playing and I like doing this, then, you know, you could consider something else. But if you're going to come to us, you want to really love to play.
Yeah.
You know, you better love playing, because you're going to be doing so much of it. You know, that's really the
Yeah. No, it absolutely sounds like a very well-rounded degree for a multifaceted, as you mentioned, a multifaceted career, because I'm sure 90%, 99% of the time, you're not just going to be, say, the Beyonce who's singing vocals. You know, you will be involved, and you may eventually be the Beyonce, but you might have to be involved in other elements to get there eventually. If can I just pick on one thing you said there about the instruments? So say I enter as a drummer, and the drums, they're my instrument.
Yeah.
And will I be learning theory about other instruments while
Yeah.
I'm there, alongside with improving my individual instrument?
Absolutely. In fact, everything I forgot to mention, in first year, everybody has to do piano as a second instrument, regardless of what instrument they play. So including the drummers.
Yeah.
So we don't treat drummers any different, or singers for that matter, who often sometimes are treated differently. We don't treat them any differently. Of course, we treat them differently technically, because they've got a different. Of course, we treat them differently in the band, because the role of a singer in the band and the role of a drummer in the band is different. But as a musician, we treat them exactly the same. And we would expect, you know, drummers at the end of 4 years to have the same theoretical and harmonic knowledge as a piano player.
Yeah, because as you mentioned,
because a drummer. Otherwise, a drummer ends up in that terrible situation where they're the only person in the band who can't write a tune. So so they're disadvantaged in that way. So we make sure that everybody who leaves the program is completely well-rounded in every area, and then specialized in their own area.
Exactly, and I think that's a common thread with many of the DCU courses, is that we're trying to create very employable and well-rounded graduates, whether it's a very broad degree or quite a specific degree like this. It's about the skills that you leave with and how you can use them in the workplace.
Yeah, we always say this is the course that means you never have to say no. And what we mean by that is that when you leave the program, somebody says to you, well, I need somebody to play guitar in a pantomime. Can you do that? You say, yeah. I need somebody to write an arrangement for the singer. Yeah. Could you maybe improvise a solo on this tune here for this recording? Yeah. What style do you want to do? Because we go through many. It's called a BA in Jazz and Contemporary Music Performance, and that word and contemporary music performance, or those words, are very important, because we teach it through the medium of jazz, but jazz in itself brings in music from all over. So we have funk bands, we have salsa band, we have Brazilian music, playing Brazilian music, and within jazz music itself, it does all kinds of stuff. And we've had students who've done heavy metal jazz, believe it or not. We've had ones who've brought in folk music from their own countries into it. We have at the moment nearly 50% international students. We have a very high international quotient, because music is international. So you end up with a lot of people. I think I haven't looked this year, but last year we had musicians from 27 different countries.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, if we speak about that application process for a minute, it is a course that maybe now this has changed with COVID, so you might be able to advise on it, but was restricted entry, so it required an audition naturally to get into the course. Do you want to talk a little bit of how that was pre-COVID and maybe how it's adapted now with the current climate?
Yeah, it hasn't changed much except in the mechanics of how it works, but the actual process is the same. You need to have the general entry requirements for the university, and you need to pass an audition. I think this year is 419 points. Now, how that works is there are 200 points that are given for your audition. They're available for your audition. So you can get up to 200 points from your audition, and you need, I guess, 219 points from your leaving cert. So that's just to talk about the point system. So you need to pass the general entry requirements, get the point system, and then pass our audition. So how does our audition work? In normal circumstances, you come in, you play two pieces first, like contrasting pieces in any style you like. It doesn't have to be. People say, "Oh, do I have to play jazz? Do I have to know something?" No, you don't have to. We don't believe that that it's in your best interest to come in and play something you're not comfortable with in an effort to impress us, because it's very unlikely to work for you or for us. What's much more likely to work is if you come in and play something for us that you think best represents you right now. This is what I do. This is what I feel most comfortable doing. This is how I feel represents me as a musician right now. That's what you should play. Mm-hmm. We have some FAQs that we send out that list out all these different questions that people have about the audition. So you do that. You play two pieces, and you can bring musicians to play with you if you want. You can play the backing tracks. You can do all kinds of stuff. And then we talk to you. We have a chat about why do you want to do it. Tell us about your life in music. Tell us about what your experience is. Have you had lessons? All of this kind of stuff. And then that's basically the way that works. Now, in the event that we can't do it in person, we have an online version of that. So where we basically ask you to upload 2 performances, and then we interview you like this on live. So basically it's the same idea though. 2 contrasting pieces. What do I mean by contrasting? I don't mean one heavy metal and one classical, although that can be okay too if that's what you want to do.
That's your range.
Yeah, we're not requiring that. What we mean is like not 2 tunes that are exactly the same, not 2 tunes that are exactly the same tempo and exactly the same vibe, and where you do exactly the same things in both tunes. That's not going to give you. It's not going to give you an opportunity to show us a good range of what you can do. So that's what we mean by contrasting pieces. But that's how it will work in the COVID situation. We will go online, and we have a way of doing that.
Yeah. I mean, we've all had to adapt in some capacity. So it's great to hear that it's still ongoing, and the course isn't postponed or anything. It's still carrying on. One, I found probably the most unique part about the course would be the relationship or the partnership that you have with the Berkeley College of Music in Boston. A fascinating connection for an Irish university to have. How did that come to be?
Well, it goes back a long way. Originally, this program originated in a different institution in New Park Music Centre, or a version of this program, of a similar one that I was involved with. And Berkeley became a partner of that program. And then when we moved to DCU, when the program was revalidated in DCU, Berkeley made the agreement with DCU as well. For those of you who don't know, Berkeley College of Music is the biggest private music school in the world. It has 4,700 students all playing music on a campus in Boston. It's a phenomenal place. They have 12 buildings in downtown Boston. They have a concert hall. I mean, it's an extraordinary place. And they also have an online degree. They have more than 10,000 students on the online program. They do these MOOCs, MOOC, the massive online course. They have over 1 million subscribers to that. I mean, it's just a phenomenal operation. And they have a thing called their global partners, and we're one of them. So these are people that are partners of them around the world. And how this works is somebody who wants to go to Berkeley, and lots of people do, they audition 8,700 people every year for 4,500 places. For 1,100 places. There's 4,500 in the total.
Yeah.
It's just phenomenal because it's the most famous music school in the world. Anyway, what they do is they they have an agreement with us. It's called a credit transfer agreement. So somebody can come to us and study for 2 years in DCU. And after 2 years, they can take their credits, assuming they've passed their exams and all of that, of course. They can take their credits and transfer them into Berkeley and enter Berkeley and finish their degree in Berkeley.
Wow.
So it works.
Yeah, I mean, such an amazing opportunity for an Irish student to really be able to experience that. And even, you know, I don't know if some people might even stay over in the States and try to start their career
Well, I can tell you that I've got three. There are three I can tell you about immediately. Very interesting. One is a producer in Los Angeles now. I haven't even talked about what a producer is, because that's another thing this program trains you for, to be a producer. So he's a producer in Los Angeles, and there's another girl who's in New York, and she's teaching there. And then the most exotic of all, there's one of our graduates who came to us and then went to Berkeley, is now the head of a jazz program in Kathmandu in Nepal, in the Kathmandu Jazz Conservatory. She's the deputy director of that.
So for students who wonder, is there a career outside of Ireland after this course, I think that's more than true. More than
true. Well, I would say if you're really of an international level musician, you probably will be working internationally. That's what it is. It's really hard these days for anybody to just have their career in one country. Mm-hmm. And music is completely international, and it's completely, or was up to COVID, and people just travel all the time. You know, I mean, in my normal life, I worked it out and was a bit mad though, but in last year, between the 15th of December in 2019 and the 15th of January in 2020, I traveled 35,750 miles in a month.
Wow.
Now, that's not normal, but I do travel a lot as part of my work, and I've been in more than 70 countries at this point as a performer and as a teacher, as a composer. So you say, well, you know, you're almost certainly going to be working abroad, and you know, it's exciting, it's great to be doing that, but everybody does it, and but they only do it at a certain level. In other words, if you don't really have the tools, you are not going to be working abroad, because you're competing abroad as well. I mean, one of the brutal things about being a musician, I mean, I don't mean brutal, I mean as in terrible the way we use it in Ireland. I mean, brutal reality is that every time you play a gig, and let's say you're the bass player or the drummer, somebody else is not playing. Mm-hmm. Right? So you've taken that from somebody else. I don't mean physically, but obviously you've been chosen instead of somebody else. Mm-hmm. Now, for you to be that person who's chosen, the very least you need is the same knowledge and skills as the person you're going to replace. Mm-hmm. That's the starting point. That's not the finishing point. The finishing point is when you're extra talent and all that stuff. But the very starting point before a professional person will consider you is that, do you have the skills if I'm an employer, because basically what they are, band leaders, your employer. Do you have just like any job, you know, music is wonderful and it's passionate, but there's a pragmatic element to it. And I am a band leader as well. And if I have guys in my band, and I use that not in the gender sense, but the generic sense, if I have people in my band, the first thing I'm going to want to know is, can they play the music that I have? Mm-hmm. That's the first thing. I mean, so for me to travel internationally, and to play with guys in Greece, and to play with guys in America, and to play with guys in Japan, I have to have the kind of skills that, at least have the kind of skills that they can also get in Japan, mm-hmm. at least.
Yeah, at the minimum, yeah.
Or else I'm not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. So really we have to be realistic. You know, if you're really serious about having a life in music, you need a toolbox that's full of stuff that you can use.
Yeah.
And what this program does is it gives you that stuff. Mm-hmm. And what I should say about a program like ours is that we're small by the standards of many programs, not music programs. Most music programs are kind of small, but by the standards of the university generally. So we have about 100 students across 4 years, so about 25 people in a year approximately. And we're in one part of the university that is specially for us, because we need soundproofing, we need specialized equipment, drums, all that stuff. So we really have a community vibe. Mm-hmm. Because everybody's in the one place. Mm-hmm. So you're there, you're seeing all your fellow students, you're seeing the teachers, the people are going in. And another thing I should mention is that all of the teachers are professional performing musicians. They're working right now as performers. So if they ask you to do something or suggest this is a good thing to do, it's not because they got it out of a book. It's because they know that they're probably going to do it that night on the gig. So these are all important points to understand about the program. It is a repository of information, but it's also a community of musicians.
Absolutely, yeah. And as you mentioned, you're getting the students are getting their experience from people who are experienced, and then that might differ. Obviously, if it's a more say if it's a science subject, it might be from people who've worked in the lab or people who've worked out in industry, and that applies also to music. You know, we want to make sure you're learning from the best. One thing, maybe a little bit off topic, but it's just a personal memory I have is when I was a student ambassador, I worked down in the kind of summer school that you guys ran one year, and I think it might have been people from Berkeley came over. So if there are students who are listening who maybe are at that younger age and who are thinking that they love their instrument now, what was that about, and does that run most summers?
No, well, it did, but it was with Berkeley, and Berkeley came over for 2 summers in a row. We were supposed to do at least 3. Unfortunately, COVID intervened, and at the moment, you know, even Berkeley's online. They're not even on campus. So we'd have to wait and see. It was a great thing. It was a wonderful thing. 100 students, 80 to 100 students, I think, for a week. I think that's right. We had them, and it was great for young people. I would recommend there's an organization in Dublin called Rock Jam that a lot of their students came to that. If there are young people there who think, you know, I'd love to get to play people and get a little bit of good teaching, there's an organization called Rock Jam that runs kind of band things on Saturday mornings usually, and they're in about 15 places now, and it's run by graduates of our program. And so if you want some early training, you know, if you're not at Leaving Cert level at this point, but you feel like you'd really like to go in with something like that, they're great people to check out. They're just called Rock Jam. Very good.
Yeah, just in the case that there's a parent or a teacher, guidance counselor, and maybe they have just a slightly younger student who might be interested in that course in future, that there are kind of informal introductions already that you can kind of get used to it. Ronan, there's just one question that came in there about timetabling, and I don't know if this is specifically related to COVID, but how many hours approximately of education would you be getting every week in this course?
Yeah, contact hours, of course, which of course means time in a room with the teacher. It will vary somewhere between 12 and a half and 15 hours a week. So now, some people say, you know, especially if you're coming out of Leaving Cert, probably say, that doesn't seem very much. But actually, you know, you would never get a music program that would teach much more than that. And the reason is because for every hour that you do in a class, you're going to need at least 2 hours to practice to be ready for the lesson the next week. So if you've got 12 hours and 12 to 15 hours, we're spending somewhere between, you know, 30 to 40 hours every week at music. This is why I say, if you want to do this program, you better like it. You better like music, you know, because you're going to be doing a lot of it, you know. So that's really important thing. So somewhere between 12 and a half to 15 hours. It varies from year to year. Something like, won't be less than 12 and a half, won't be more than 15.
Yeah, and then as you mentioned, of course, there is things you have to do outside of lectures, and that goes for any course in university. And there's contact hours, as you said, sitting in class, but then there'll be assignments or group things to work on outside that. And sometime, I'm sure a lot of your students might gig part-time or might,
they do.
You know, tutor. So there's time for that as well.
Yeah, they're already playing. I mean, they're already playing and recording and sometimes touring even.
Yeah. Well, listen, Ronan, that brings us right up to the half-an-hour mark. Thank you so much for that really valuable information. And guys, if there's any questions, you can reply to the email that you got this link through, studenthelp@dcu.ie. And I'm sure Ronan would be happy if there were specific questions, I could forward it on. But Ronan, I'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you very, very much for joining us today. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
I'll remove you now. Bye-bye.